Okay, should be live. Need to sort some more things out. I'm running a little late because I've had some technical difficulties, but we should be back on schedule. Let's make this bigger. It's going to be another one of these types of videos, chatting away. Your internet's been down twice in the past 15 minutes. Oh dear, snowy times. Is it messing with everything? Mark, how's it going? You blame the weather? Yeah, I would. Right, I need to do something in the background quickly. Just get Facebook up so that we can get the post that I made earlier on the Facebook, because that is going to be our main starting point for today's video. It is going to be about good habits in the Pokemon trading card game, of course. Flaming Rex, how's it going? Paul Carter, that boy Seb, Mark, your legs are sore. Oh, from ice skating. Okay, there's some context there at least. Okay. Right, I want to pop this discussion out. I don't know if it's even possible to do this. Technology. Show in tab. Aha. Prince Seaful post. Well, that didn't work. Oh, it did work. Okay, excellent. Right, so that can be this. Can I turn notifications off or something? What's going to be the best way to do this? Because I don't want my Facebook going off the whole time. This is clearly terrible planning. What's the best thing I can do here? Can I paste it into anything? Is that going to be ridiculous? Probably will be ridiculous, right? I just want to make sure that my turn off chat. There you go. Turn off chat for all contacts. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. I should really have known that previously, because that means I can actually use Facebook more often on these things. Okay. So today's video is going to be about good habits in the Pokemon trading card game. And this is a topic that I went onto Facebook to try and get opinions from other people, because I think it's important to know the ones that most people believe are important, ones I think are important, and ones that we can come up with together that need to be tackled. So you can see there's a few people who have been posting stuff here, and that will be the starting point really for anything else. We'll start jotting all those down. We'll try and find themes and stuff like that. Well, that didn't work, did it? Why am I still getting notifications? Oh my goodness. Okay. Hopefully this all works out. I don't know. At least my chat's turned off. But yeah. So we'll be jumping between Facebook and my trusty Excel spreadsheet, and we'll be jotting down different themes, coming up with them, and then we'll basically make a checklist of basically the best way to have a turn, just like in general. But also things you should be conscious of before, really, and during an event, and things that maybe some players are doing that you're not doing, and it could help maybe your own testing time, but definitely in-game is where the majority of this conversation is going to be about. So here we go. Let's kick off by just seeing the post I made this 10 hours ago on Hey Fonte. We got a good, decent amount of responses, to be fair, so thanks to all of these people. And we'll talk about all of these things and maybe like prioritize them as well. I've really not made much of a plan this week. It's going to be a lot more open of a discussion, because good habits can be such an encompassing phrase that it's one that we could be talking about for a while. There's a few that I had on the top of my head, but it feels like this has been something that a lot of people have jumped on, and they've taken their own meaning to what I meant by good habits, which is a good thing because we can try and get as much in as possible, and we'll actually have a lot to talk about. Doomsday, how's it going? Helps polish prep for Turin. That's going to be the intention. So this is my post saying that we're streaming, which we are. It's an open discussion about how to train good habits during in-game play. So this is while you're actually at tournaments and even testing, what are the most important or underrated good habits to execute whilst in a game of Pokemon. So the first one we have is from Tubbs. He's a UK player, very good player as well. And he says, speak while playing. It really tilts me when people just tap their cards and never say a word. So communication is where I'm going to place this. Because really we're going to try and get these into more concise, defined terms. I'm not going to put getting tilted by people. But communication, making it as clear as possible that people know what you're doing. So this is actually not just important for having a good experience while playing the game. Of course, having conversations great. You will come up against players who are naturally much more conversational than others. But for me, one of the most important things as a player is to be assured that you and your opponent know how the game is going and what you are doing at the time. Because of course, if you are as clear as possible with your board state as well, presentation-wise, and you're communicating your own actions themselves, there is never going to be a miscommunication which can lead to penalties. For example, we've all known the N baiting issue that can happen, where people would versus seeker try and put an end to their hand, but the other person has already started to shuffle their deck because they didn't get the picture that you're versus seeking an end to your hand before actually playing the end itself. So communication to try and make things as clear as possible is really important because it will avoid silly errors that you don't need to happen. And also I think a lot of the time communicating what you're doing can also bring out a reasoning. You're doing this because you're trying to achieve something, right? So you can say that you're ultra balling for this to find this. It's again a means of you like forgetting or not forgetting steps during a search. For example, so often you'll see people ultra ball and they'll grab themselves a Bridget and start searching for 3 Pokemon. And that's because they've missed a step because they haven't ultra balled for Lele, Wonder Tag, Bridget, 3 basics, right? I'm not saying you have to say all those things in that exact order and be robotic about it, but you need to make it clear to yourself and the opponent what's going on when you're doing it. So I think that's really important. And for a caster now myself, the board state is important. So that's verbal and non-verbal communication, and presenting your cards is also something we'll get onto a little bit later. I think it's mentioned in the post, but it is important to, you know, at the very least avoid penalties and be aware of what your opponent's doing, so you know exactly how many cards they're drawing and stuff like that, and why they're drawing that amount of cards at times, or why they're interacting with their discard pile or their deck or this, that, or the other. It's important to be aware and in the game as much as possible, and communication is one way. So I would say verbally, this is what it's about. Non-verbal communication is a big part of good habits that it seems like a lot of people have jumped on. This encompasses a lot of different things. There's going to be body language is a big one that that is neglected in the game by a lot of people. Dave's Type 312 is now hosting with 1 viewer. Thanks so much. And who am I missing here? Who else is here? I think this is also about being friendly to the opponent. I know. Don't worry. But body language is something. Tells and stuff like that is a whole different type of communication, but I think again, just sort of being not like presentable, but being comfortable is important. And during the game, it's a topic that we get back to a lot. and there's lots of different types of communication under this umbrella, and it really is going to be a big part of it. Fresh trim, thanks so much. Yes, I have got a winter collection haircut going on. Okay, so Tubbs, thanks for that. Let's see what other people are saying about this. Some people saying that they're not so good at speaking while playing. I mean, personally myself, I'm naturally quite extroverted, and I do get involved in conversation, but I don't really enjoy talking about things outside of the game. I know there are conversationalist players who will talk about the weather outside and stuff like that, and personally I will do that before the game or after the game, when we're setting up and doing all that sort of stuff. Where have you come from? How long have you been playing the game? What's it like, you know, in your Airbnb? How's your trip been if we're abroad? All these sorts of things. I'll get these topics done before I get into the game, because in the game I am trying to be as focused as possible. So I understand that some people don't want just like pure silence. I think, however, there are definitely people who won't want to talk to you. That it's just a natural thing that some people do, some people don't. I don't think I've ever told someone to stop talking to me, but like, you'll just naturally get a vibe from people. Someone's going to be giving you one-word answers if you're just throwing loads of chat their way, and others will be really into it. I think that's just a player-by-player thing. I don't think you need to worry if you're someone who doesn't like to talk. I personally like to just sort of go with the flow, really, but I will not really be a huge conversationalist myself during the game itself, really. So yeah. Can you have snacks while playing? Yeah, you can. You can have water, but not at the playing area. You can have any drink. If it's in your bag, you can quickly just grab a sip or whatever. And yeah. Oh, hold on. I've just realised that I don't have my sponsor things on here. Pow. Where are they? They're hidden behind this thing. Get down here. Here they are. Okay. Oh god. Don't start messing with that, Joe. Oh, I've done it again. Okay. This is the one I want to move. I thought it was looking a bit barren today. Okay. Let's get those there. Okay. So, more on this topic. This one's huge. Good chats, playing against people, having a laugh during the game. It is, I mean, it depends on the size of the event, really. If you're at a league and stuff, I'll obviously just be joking around and doing whatever, but oftentimes you can give away information that you don't want to give away if you're talking too much. Okay. Say hello, exchange pleasantries. Yeah, clear state of what moves you're making. That's pretty much what I'm trying to get to. Okay. Most relatable comment. Trying to be polite, funny at all times. Triggered. Okay. But yeah, you do have to think about it. You are interacting with someone for basically an hour, right? Where you're literally stuck with each other, unless you're playing like a donk deck or something. So it is definitely something where, and again, these are people who you'll probably see over and over. If you're someone like myself, or if you're trying to get into the game as much as possible and going to, you know, the same league or whatever, you'll see this person a lot of times throughout the year, and you'll end up chatting with them in future tournaments and stuff. So it is important to try and interact and get out of your shell a little bit, I would say. Really good. So there's more on that sort of topic. We can go back to these sorts of things as we go, because there are some topics that we sort of hit on multiple times. So Alex Bramman has said, speed, don't shuffle until you have to. So annoying when someone plays 3 nest ball in a row and takes an hour each time. In-game speed, I guess, is something we can put down. Doomsday942 donated £5. Feeling generous. Early Christmas present. Wow, that's absolutely phenomenal. Thanks, Doomsday. That is really great of you. Thanks a lot. So, speed of play. In the rules, it is meant to be a lively pace of play. And that is what is officially what we should be doing. I think shuffling is sort of it's a topic that a lot of people want to sort of, there's a bad light around shuffling in general. I always like to shuffle a lot because I want to avoid any because you literally can be penalized for insufficient shuffling, and I have in the past, so it's something that I've adapted myself. So making sure you do sufficient randomization is still really important for me. And that's, you know, based on your own shuffling style, riffles, cuts, pile shuffles, whatever you want to do. Obviously, pile shuffling mid-game isn't going to work. It takes too long. So likely some riffles, some piles, some cuts, and always offering to the opponent when you finish shuffling is common courtesy, and is going to rule out any form of manipulating your own deck, which obviously you wouldn't do anyway, but with sufficient shuffling and by offering to cut, you are removing any doubt that that is ever going to be part of the game. And again, it's just trying to be courteous as well at times, and sufficient randomization is important, but also lively pace of play. There are people who are naturally fast at the game, people who good habits to watch Team OmniPoke every day. Yes. How much did I say was facial expressions? We're coming back to it, Doomsday. There's going to be a lot of it. What is considered short shuffling? I normally shuffle for maybe 30 to 45 seconds, I would say. I typically do 7 sort of overhand mash shuffles. I think they're called mash shuffles when you basically take the top section of your deck and put it in between the bottom section of your deck at the time. I probably do this about 7 times. Then I will do some Hindu shuffling, where you're literally taking the bottom and putting it onto the top of your deck like this. And then you will do, then I typically do 4 or 5 mashes once again, and then just do 1 cut and then present it to my opponent. That's typically how I shuffle. I have my own pattern of shuffling. I think it's also really good if you have a consistent shuffling pattern. This will help in a few reasons, because if you have a consistent pattern, you can't be accused of slow play or whatever. If you just if you are trying to play quick, it is annoying if you get into a shuffling pattern. But I always think, even when you're playing quickly and trying to catch up on time, if maybe you've lost a game, I still think it's important to never ever just go like mash, 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 cut please, and like force your opponent to cut. You should always, shuffling should be its own thing. Like, you could manage your time during a game, but I think shuffling should always be the same. It's really important. So I think having a shuffling pattern that is consistent is very important to, again, make sure that your deck is sufficiently randomized, and also because you don't want to give the illusion to your opponent that you are trying to speed up a game. Even if you are trying to speed up a game, you want to be shuffling consistently. And also what I found is, now that I have a consistent shuffling pattern, it often gives me time to think, because my hands just have muscle memory. So I'm just doing this thing and I'm actually thinking about what's in my hand, what the board state is like. I'm taking a moment to take things in whilst this is all happening, and you're almost buying yourself some thinking time when you're shuffling. So I think the fact that I have this pattern, this rhythm that I always stick to, it means I'm not looking at my deck and I'm not thinking about, okay, mash, 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 cut, 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 mash, 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 cut, cut, cut. I'm just there doing it. It's just robotic, and it gives me time to think about the game. And I think if you have a consistent pattern, whatever works for you, and if you just stick to that pattern, I think it's good for also buying yourself a moment's thinking time as well, which is pretty cool. Who won the fantasy draft in London? For the OmniPoke one, it was Luke. Joe's thinking about what he wants to riff off the top. Yeah, praying to Arceus. If you riffle a deck, can be considered randomized after between 5 and 7 shuffles and cut. Yeah, I know it is. But oftentimes, I don't know, I like to throw some cuts in there and stuff as well, just to, you know, fully separate the deck. Because mashes can sometimes, you can end up having the same card. Like, for example, your opening first card, if you just do piles, could still end up being in like the top 10 cards, say, and that can be considered manipulating the deck because you have moved it in position, but you've only kept it in the same area of the deck, and that's especially important when in the Pokemon trading card game we're quite unique in that we can dig 7 cards deep into a deck during a turn, and sometimes even more now that we have Zoroark available. So it's important to also add different cuts and stuff in there as well to make sure that there is no way that you could know what's going to be at the top of the deck, and also removing any stuff like that. And also declumping, not allowed. I would say the only time you are able to move a card that you have seen in your deck is if you're taking it out of your deck. This is something that you can see people do just naturally, casually. You should not do this. You should only... So your cards should be in an order. Like, the cards... You pick up your deck because you're doing a search, right? You should not move any card that's in this deck at all, other than the cards that you are allowed to take out of the deck, right? So you shouldn't ever declump. Even if you see 3 Frogadiers sat next to each other or whatever, you shouldn't... Well, 3 Frogadiers is a bad example because you want them to sort of be together because you'll always search them out, but... for example, if you're playing a Max Elixir deck and you see, oh god, I don't want 6 Dark Energies next to each other, and you start like sort of plucking them around, even if you do some sufficient randomization, that is a big no-no. You can't do that. And some people think it's fine because they're going to shuffle anyway. You can't do that. That's against the rules. Because the theory is you sufficiently randomize these 6 Dark Energies together, there's no reason why they can't naturally declumped with sufficient randomization. So if you see this happening, you can and probably should call a judge on it. It is a huge part of the card game, and these are rules that some people like aren't aware of. They can casually do it, and especially now that the game is getting... The prizes are getting much more... there are more prizes on the line. There are more big tournaments and sort of less important smaller tournaments in the game. There will be harsh penalties for these sorts of things, so don't get caught out. You should only touch the cards that you know you're taking out of your deck with the card that you're using to take out of your deck, if that makes sense. So that's something you definitely cannot do. It's a big Nicky no. Exactly. So don't fall into the trap. Don't lull yourself into thinking you've seen someone else do it. It's okay. It's not okay at all. You should only touch the cards that you're pulling out of your deck if there are any at all. So there you go. That's an important one with randomization. I know this is on pace of play, but I think shuffling itself is a big one. It's a topic that's on a lot of people's minds. There's obviously people being witch hunted for cheating literally just this weekend. I think there was a few posts about it. So I'm sort of covering that all in this. Pace of play is sort of related to that. I think shuffling's a big sort of manipulated thing that people trying to manipulate the clock will change. And that's why I think it's also important to have a consistent shuffling pattern. So these can't be accusations thrown at you because your opponent doesn't, like, sometimes they can get a hunch or whatever. Sometimes I can be playing quickly in-game because I know I'm behind and I need to win the game. But as long as you're shuffling consistently, you can't say that your pace of play has changed too much, right? And also, normally what I do, where if I lose a game 1, normally I will physically tell my opponent, I'm going to speed up here, but don't feel the need for you to improve, like you to alter your own pace of play. So, and I say at any point, slow me down. If there's a step that you missed, I'm willing to, you can stop me, you can slow me down doing these things. Because going back to this verbal communication thing, as long as you're talking for the opponent, keeping them up in what you're doing, you really can't, like, if you look at juniors, for example, juniors play at ridiculous pace and their board gets so sloppy, it's insane, right? It's a judge's nightmare to look over juniors and seniors. And to a lot lesser extent, it can happen in Masters when there are people panicking trying to get back into a game after losing game 1. As an example with Danny Altavia, he has a rapid pace of play. From the word go to the very end turn, he played very consistently quickly during his game. He was always talking to his opponent. He was immaculate. This was on stream, actually, against Xander Pero. And he, from the word go, was always a very fast player. There are naturally people who play quicker than others. And that's just something that you'll realize. That's a pattern. There was a game where he went up, and then a game that he was sort of struggling in, but his pace of play never changed. It's just natural that some people will have a different pace of play. There's nothing wrong with prompting your opponent. And what I mean by that is, I'm not saying call over a judge as soon as you think someone's slow playing, although that is something you can do. I'm saying, again, it all comes back down to communication, really. If you think someone has been taking their time mulling over a certain decision, you can say, like, okay, you've been thinking about this for a while, is there going to be a decision in a moment? Or you can ask, is this a fail search? Something like that, you know. It's a way of getting around these sorts of things to make sure your opponent is consistent in their own pace of play as well. But these sorts of, like, little prompts really can get your opponent, if they are stuck in a loop or whatever, sometimes you can get into your own head. There are important turns, of course, where it can be a make or break decision, and they're trying to think about sometimes even calculations. It's something that you can do. Obviously, you don't want to be like, dude, hurry up, you know. It's about how you do it, and this is something that can be done. Silphco, it should be your, because he's your opponent. He's not you are opponent. You can get a prize penalty for rushing. I'm not talking about rushing. I'm talking about, well, this is exactly it, right? Making sure that you're still keeping your opponent in the know, letting them know that what you're doing at all times, and also keeping your board neat and tidy. It's going to mean that you can play at a faster pace, but as long as it is always clear what you're doing, I think you really can go at the pace that you want to. Your own tempo is going to be fine as long as it's clear to everyone around you. So there you go. I think that's important. The thing about speed, this is the thing. It's a really touchy topic because there are players who are naturally faster and naturally slower. That's only fine. And I'm going to talk about decisions that you make before even, like, starting your turn and stuff like that. So you can, some people may think of this as slower play. I'll go to the example of Tord Reklev choosing not to promote a Pokemon for about a minute during a stream game over in the American International Championships, which then ended up time being called before he promoted a Pokemon, and it was a big fiasco about these sorts of things. But he was completely in his right to do this because there are things you have to discover and decide before your turn even begins. Before you've even taken your top card, there are decisions that you have to be making. And so I think speed is really down to yourself. And oftentimes I think players can be called out for being slow when other people would look at that decision that Tord was doing. He was thinking about what Pokemon to promote. Whereas other people would be like, oh, just shove the Trubbish with a float stone in the active and go, man. You know you're always going to do that. That's not always the case, especially with supporters that we have in the card game and escape ropes and all these other things that can be possible. So there are decisions that you make before your turn, or that you have to make before your turn even begins. So it is important to be aware of these things and to not really jump on someone if they are taking their time on certain decisions, because some will be important at different times. So yeah, speed's a weird one because a lot of people get bad stick for playing slowly and stuff, and the amount of times I've heard people saying like, oh man, lost game one, then he slow played me out. I feel like you are in the right to call someone up and call a judge. Call a judge if you feel like you're being slow played. Yeah, that's what you should do, right? If you feel like you're being slow played, don't just let it happen and complain to your friends afterwards and be like, oh, boo, slow play, this game sucks. Like, what a terrible guy to play against. I hope I never see him in a tournament again. You are in control of this. Judges are here to help. If your opponent is slow playing, typically I won't just like shoot my hand up and be like, whoa, dude, this search took 2 minutes. Judge, look after him. Give me a prize penalty now. It's going to be like, okay, dude, can you help me out? Can you make a decision here? And then if his turn continues to be slow, obviously you can judge the situation. There are crucial turns in games where you know your opponent is physically thinking over something a lot, because it's, you know, small margins of percentages that they're trying to give themselves the best win position. Typically it's when people are behind they'll do this, and they'll take as much time as possible. But then there's the flip side of your opponent's won game 1, and now they've done Ultra Ball search, shuffled their deck fully, put down Lele, shuffled their deck fully, Bridgeted, shuffled their deck fully, stuff like that. That is obviously, like, you can't say it's slow play because they are doing every action that you're allowed to do, but you can maybe give your opponent a prompt, or maybe you could say, when they are Ultra Balling for the Lele, you can say, oh, you're going to play that, and you can just, even just like tapping their deck and stuff, that can buy you seconds at times. But if you are aware of someone slow playing and you think they are taking too long on decisions where they don't have much to do that turn, or if they literally have done every action they can do in their turn, they've played a supporter, they've attached energy, they've retreated, they've done everything they can do, and they're just debating like an attack and stuff like that, you can prompt people, and if prompts don't work, you can call a judge. Typically they will monitor the pace of the opponent for a while, and yourself, of course. So don't call an opponent, then start playing furiously to make up for the fact that they've played slower, right? Because you can be punished as well. You need to maintain your own tempo of play. But everyone has their own different tempo, so I think it is a sort of grey area, and you just have to play it by ear, really. And it should be pretty obvious what's going on. Mark. Okay, people who have dice bags, boxes, and don't get them out until their Pokemon take damage. I think this will sort of be towards managing your play area. Now, I've known players who have never owned dice in their lives and will always ask the opponent, can I borrow your dice, and stuff like that. That's obviously fine. There are times when you're in a tight area, for example, there could be 3 different pairs on a table, and you know, there's just not enough space for everyone to put their dice back and stuff on the table. There are times when that's like the right thing to do, and stuff like that. But I think in general, have all the equipment, guys. Have dice, have why can't I spell? Have dice, have a randomizing dice, have burn markers, have a GX marker. It's best to have these things because it's something that you should have. You played 5 worlds without owning any dice. Jesus Christ. Just throw a dice off the table. You don't need to have a playmat. You do need to sleeve your cards, I would say. But in general, I think it's just better to have the equipment so that you don't ever come into this situation where someone else like Mark turns up and he doesn't have dice either, and then you end up having to ask someone across the table from you to borrow dice and stuff like that. That's pretty awkward, so you do need to have equipment with you. I think generally most people will. It's not a big part of it, but in a more general sense, managing your play area, being neat and again consistent with your own play area is important. What's your active Pokemon? How many energy does it have on it? Is the tool visible? Can you see the cards below it? All these sorts of things. And if a bench is really wedged up together, this was obviously an issue more so when Skyfield was around. When you were trying to have a row of 8 Pokemon, it was sometimes hard. Never cover Pokemon up. Never cover your prize cards up with a Pokemon sat on top of it, stuff like that. Make sure there's a distinct gap between your last bench Pokemon and your discard pile. All these sorts of things, really important. So I think I've seen this more and more now that I stream, because I look at games from like a bird's eye view now a lot of the time. I can see how it's really important for judges for the game area to be nicely laid out and stuff like that, right? Because they can't do their jobs right if they can't see the board correctly, or if there's an energy hiding under a Gardevoir and stuff. At the worst of times, it can lose you a game because you or your opponent hasn't done this correctly. There has been games where I've had to lean over to my opponent and say, hey, can I just see what tool this is? And when you're doing that, you know it's bad. It's bad for yourself and it's bad for them, because It can change decision making for both players, really. They may feel like they need to dig for an extra card because they forgot they put any XP share down on turn 1 on a wind pod that's now a geyser pod that already has a grass energy attached to it. All these weird things could happen. You don't field blower on a turn because you think there's nothing that you can field blower away. Then you get end into exactly that field blower that you could have actually thinned because there was a hiding tool around on the board. Stuff like that. So making sure that your play area is fine and making sure you can see what's going on their side as well. I know there's big stigma against touching your opponent's cards, but it all wraps back into communication. If you say, mate, can you straighten out your Xerneas break with 7 energies on it? They'll be more than willing to, because they have a Xerneas break with 7 energies on it. But you know what I mean, right? If there's something you're not sure of or you think looks sloppy, you can just communicate with them and say, can you straighten that up? Can you say, like, oh, was that evolved from Revolts or a Curlia? If you're trying to devolve them and all that shenanigans. You can do these things. It is in your prerogative to know what's going on. And obviously seeing these things as clearly as possible is going to be important. So yeah. You straighten it up for your opponent? Yeah, I mean, Mark, I probably would do that as well. I typically say it before just jumping over and grabbing a card, because I know there are people who hate this. It feels like a beginner thing as well. They feel like if they've not been to a tournament before, they'll be like, ooh, why'd he just touch my cards, you know? I don't want to be rude, but it just feels like once I've been to a tournament a million times, when someone asks for my discard pile, I actually like smirk like, of course you can. It's fully your right to. But some people, especially newer players, they can be a little shifty about it. So you can even just do like a quick, like, you're already leaning over and just sort of like point, like go like, can I look? And that's all it takes, right? It's a little courtesy thing. And it all jumps back to communication, really. I think it's one of the most premium things. So I'm glad that that was, just put your cards neatly. I know, right? I know. Okay. Let's move on. Okay, so Nicholas brings up some interesting points. 4, in fact, retreating after playing draw supporter, not before. So this is like in-game mechanics that we want to iron out. So in-game mechanics. So this is getting more towards actual in-game play now. These sorts of things are all more to do with what's generally accepted, what's good manners, how you can be, you know, a courteous, polite, and good player all around. But this is more sort of general rules that a good player will get into a habit of doing. And what he means by retreating after a draw supporter, not before, this is because you should do actions after gaining the most information possible and gaining the most cards possible. If you look at this, it's way more important these days because of Zoroark, actually. Gaining as much insight as possible before doing actions is important. So typically, when you're playing a Zoroark deck, unless you know you're going to play something like a Sycamore or an N to start your turn, most of the time, if you're deciding to use your trades, you should do them before attaching an energy card, retreating a tool, even evolving at times. These sorts of things, you should typically trade first, because you could trade into cards that could change your decision and make your retreat look ridiculous or make something else look silly. So gaining as much information as possible is really important. And for this, for what he's written down exactly, there can be times where you're digging for X card, so you retreat into your new attacker saying, okay, I just need 1 fair energy off this Guardy to win the game. So you paid retreat, and then you Sycamore, you miss those 7 cards, and now you're like, well, damn, this is now stuck here, and I've completely jeopardized my game. And that's because I paid retreat before using my supporter. So yeah, it is important. I think he's got another one. Yeah, 0 energy retreater. This is also important. Because you can only retreat once per turn, it is important to do sequencing. So sequencing in general is important. Promoting something with 0 retreat after a KO seems to be a weird, difficult thing to do for many. It helps speed up the game and avoid unnecessary time loss. So this is not always the case, but that's because of Guzma and Escape Rope. But in general, it is always the right idea to promote a free retreater at the start of your turn, because it gives you potential options to then do anything you want to. So it goes back into it ties back into his first point that you gain as much information before making any decision. So basically promoting a 0 retreat cost Pokemon is as if you've made no decision at all, because you still have the option to retreat at any time during your game without any punishment, right? So it goes back to your the first point of putting a free retreat to actor essentially is as if you didn't make a decision at all. So that is in general something you can do. The only caveat to this would be that if you have a Guzma in your hand or an escape rope in your hand or any of these cards, sometimes you should think about putting something else into the active position first. For example, if you're playing a Max Elixir deck and you also have Guzma in your hand, you may want to promote like a Regirock EX and then know that you're going to Guzma this turn so you can get into your Buzzwole, but if you top deck into exactly Max Elixir, you may want to play that onto the Buzzwole first or whatever. So there are times when this isn't always the case. You can throw something into the active that you know you won't ever need or ever Max Elixir onto. These sorts of things that only interact to the bench. It could be Aqua Patch as well. Things like that could be important. But in general, sending a free retreater into the active basically means that you haven't made a decision at all, and you will then conclude your turn on the retreat as almost your last action before you end up attacking a lot of the time. So yeah. Counting the most crucial cards to check whether or not they are prized. This is a huge one. To this day, people still underestimate checking their prizes properly. So prize checking is obviously going to be a huge one. So prize checking, 0 retreat cost habits. What was the other one? Gain as much information before making a decision as possible. It's really not a hard concept to grasp. You're gaining the most informed decision possible, and in order to make the most to make the best decision possible, it needs to be the most informed decision possible, right? So that is pretty natural and stuff like that. Prize checking, I'm going to get into way more, and that's going to be part of my teaching topic, how I do prize checking, and it is, of course, of premium importance, I think. And actually, the last 3 tournaments I've been to, I've actually had a notepad with me, and I've written down prizes, because it is important. I did it at Worlds, and bombed out of Worlds. I did it at the North American Internationals, and I also did it in Bremen. I had a piece of paper, I had a notepad and a pen, and I wrote down prize checking. There are different ways that there are different methods people use, and that's kind of why I want it to be an open discussion, because I have my own technique. I learnt it from a few friends, but there are other techniques out there to do optimal prize checking and to make it as quick as possible. But it is, of course, hugely, hugely important. It works alongside discard pile checking. It all goes back to the same theory. This is pretty much what we mean by all of these sorts of things come under the umbrella of making the best informed decision as possible. And that's really what this is all about. So knowing your prizes gives you so much more information. Discard pile checking shows what you have left to draw into, how many outs you have, if you go for X line of play compared to X line of play. Looking at your opponent's discard pile to see how likely they are to respond and how likely they are to do what's next and stuff like that. That all comes down to probabilities. And if you can see certain counts of cards being on the discard pile, there are things that you no longer have to play around, and there are things that you can get away with that you previously couldn't get away with because of their discard pile. For example, 2 Field Blower have gone, you can start thinning as many tools onto your board as possible if you know that they are likely to only play 2 Field Blowers. So this is always important. This is what it all comes down to, this sort of umbrella of gain as much info as possible. So it is all very similar, even though these are different aspects of it. But here you go. Yeah, everyone took notes for Azel's power, exactly. For some reason, there's a huge stigma around notepads. I don't know why. It's just something that, it's like it never caught on. It's like it's a try-hard thing or something. But it makes absolutely no sense to me to not do it. You know? Because, I mean, I can forget these things quite easily and will forget these things. So I consult the paper and it's all good, right? I think, honestly, most people don't want to be seen as slow playing, or a lot of people don't think they can do it in under like a minute or whatever. And that is something you honestly have to train. But it really is the case that it should be something that's just standard across the board. I'm amazed that there are still so many people who don't know what's been prized and are midway through a game. It's literally written up here. Nicholas has said it literally in quotes. Oh my god, it was prized. If it wasn't prized, I would have won. It is still boggling that someone can Ultra Ball on turn 7 and be like, huh, I guess I just grab this then. And then sort of like huff and puff and get annoyed. But it just goes back to the fact that they weren't ever... They never had a game plan to begin with, it almost seems like. Because you need to manage your resources for an entire game, and if you don't know what your resources are, how the hell are you meant to manage them? So you definitely do need you need to know what's going on in your deck, right? How would you expect to win the game if you don't know what cards you're playing with, right? So it's pretty important. Don't need to search prizes if you can town map. Well, Doomsday, that's also not true, because town map could also be your the bottom card in your deck that you never access to, theoretically. There will be games when you have town map in your deck and you could never draw it. So you still need to know your prizes, even though you do play town map. But town map will be one of those cards that you look at. So okay, another one from Nicholas is avoid showing contents of your hand when in doubt of the play you're about to make. Too often you can narrow down your options if you already know one of 4 cards you're holding in your hand. So this goes back to gaining as much information, but also not giving as much information as possible. So concealing information, or concealing unnecessary. That doesn't feel like the way to spell it. So this could again go back to body language, literally verbal communication, and how does he word it? It is controlling your hand size, right? It's when physically playing cards. Examples of this is the very, very often, basically since Catcher came out, or since even, well, like forever, basically, there have been gusting effects in the trading card game. And when you see your opponent start to lean over and sort of look beyond your active Pokemon and start doing this sort of thing, you know they've got a Guzma, or a Lysander, or a Catcher, or whatever it was at the time, Pokemon Reversal, stuff like this, right? And this is something that, it's information that they literally hand to you. They may as well say out loud that they are doing these things. And this is something that you don't need to give away, but people just do. Another one is when you're debating on a decision. There is no difference between you debating on a decision while the card is in your hand and when the card is halfway on a Pokemon, right? If you're debating attaching a double colorless energy, you could be holding 4 cards in your hand, one's the double colorless energy, sit there and think about it right here. Have the discussion with yourself here, not halfway on a Tapu Lele, and you're going, God, yes. Because if that answer is no, then you've shown your opponent that one of your 4 cards is now a double colorless energy, right? So you shouldn't do these things. You really shouldn't do these things. You are gifting people stuff, right? Joe, you used to do this a lot. I did used to do this a lot. So yeah, it is really mind games do the bench check. I mean, I'll talk about tells and stuff in more detail in a bit, but like there are some players that you should actively not pick up on these things. It's weird. You sort of you basically need to know your opponent and how aware they are of their own body language to know whether or not to take cues from them, because some players may give you cues when they want to be giving you cues. You know, it's almost as if it's like a poker style thing. They're bluffing on cards or whatever. So there are people who you shouldn't try and take information from based on their body language. One of the best ones is Greninja, right? Greninja players are hilarious at this. People that don't want to get end as Greninja, so often they huff and puff and get super annoyed on their first turn because they don't want to get end out of their Splash Energy Frogadier, right? And so, well, Greninja players also, hilariously, this is why it's such a great bluff, they also huff and puff because they're playing Greninja and they didn't draw everything they needed. So it's hilarious, right? But in general, you should make decisions based on the board state. Never really take into effect... Well, you should take into account their body language and stuff. There'll be times when people actually give stuff away just by being triggered. For example, you see someone doing an opening Bridget, they're going through, and they start shaking their head, and then going, instead of 2 Rolts and a Remoraid, they just go like 1 Rolts, 1 Remoraid, and no other target, or like Rolts, Remoraid, Vulpix. Even then, you should sort of be like questioning why he would do that. Did he start with another Rolts? Has he got a Rolts in his hand? These sort of things you should start going through in your head. But if he's shaking his head and saying, can't believe this, or like, oh, second time today. Like, you hear stuff like this all the time in tournaments, right? And it's just information that you've been gifted, and it can make you, like, do things so differently. It means that you can, like, Grinch down a Rolts, knowing that it is so much more painful for you to do that in this game specifically than it would be in another game, right? So, taking these things into account is really important. And, yeah, it's something that you should try and be conscious of. You should make all of your decisions with your hand here, not by basically showing it to the world and then deciding, right? So, yeah, that's one of the big takeaways from that one. I think, as well, if you are doing these things, it is important to... I like to say they're all prized on my first search. OS Frog to OP Frog. Okay, so some people are going into this. May's brought up the Guzma thing. Nicholas actually has previous on this sort of thing. Benjamin picks up on it here. This was on stream back in London last year, where he did an escape rope Lysander in the wrong sequencing, which is lol. So it's funny that he brought it up, but obviously it's something that sticks with him now. Dale has said, grinds who cares when people touch or move cards without asking. You don't mind if you want to look at it, but if you knock out a Pokemon, announce it and let me move it. Don't flick my card to the side or towards my discard pile. I think that's rare that people will do that. I think most of the time people will... Again, it goes back to communication more so. I personally wouldn't be annoyed if someone starts putting... Well, I don't know. I wouldn't be annoyed if someone's put something to my discard pile, but if they say, okay... I don't know, Infinite Force for a knockout, and they start putting it to the discard pile, I don't hate that, but as long as, again, it goes back to communication and what sort of a player you are. I think as long as it's done in good taste and not just like, boom, get out of here. Like, if you're not like throwing their cards away, right, I think it's pretty much anything goes, really. Mark, you can't say that, right? Okay. Shay says, details on prize checking, one of the big ones. Resource and time management. So we sort of talked about this in the pacer play, but knowing the time, similar to why no one on Earth has a piece of paper and and write down their prize cards, no one wears watches in Pokemon. It makes no sense. You can wear a watch, look at when people say you may begin the round, look at your watch, and then you know the time. 50 minutes, right? Or 60 or whatever it is for Top Cut rounds. You can know exactly how much time you have remaining. You're allowed to wear a watch. Wear a watch. You have this information available to you. This can give you great information for making decisions. You can be behind in a game And typically, I like to think of the scoop point, right? It's a tipping point when you think, what do I need on this turn to bring back the game? And oftentimes, it will get to a point where you can never win the game anymore, right? And there's going to be a tipping point turn where if you have a strong turn, you can go on to win. If you have a weak turn, you will never win the game. And so many people go down this dark path where they get to a point where they will win 2% of the time, right? I know there's always the argument of N can always stabilize a game and stuff like that. But I think scooping early is, again, something that a lot of people don't do. And you need to recognize there's a tipping point turn where you will get back into this game or you won't get back into this game. Oftentimes, to get back into the game, you do need to get lucky. You need to hit, 3 or 4 specific cards to get back into the game. And literally, there are times where I draw for turn, I'll scoop after seeing my draw for turn. There'll be times when I play my supporter, I see my cards, then I'll scoop immediately. There's no point in, letting yourself get deeper and deeper into a trench where you will know you will never win the game again, right? I'm not saying you need to scoop on turn 2 because you had a bad opening, missed Bridget or whatever. I'm saying there'll be a tipping point in a game where you can feel the tides of the game going towards your opponent. They're ahead on prizes, their board state is insane, you've not set up stuff, know when to scoop. And oftentimes, knowing the time will help you know when to scoop, right? If you've won a game 1 and there's only 10 minutes left and your opponent is ahead on board state but still has 5 prizes to take, don't scoop. You'll only ever get a tie if you scoop. But if you carry on playing the game, you can end up not losing that game too and end up winning the overall series. So knowing the time going to be important. A lot of the time, bigger tournaments especially are very good at having clocks around. And that is always something you should be aware of. Where are the clocks in this room? Even if you do have a watch, sometimes you could be looking up and seeing the time and knowing how much time you have left. It's important to make these sorts of decisions. But Mark, you don't have any dice. Okay. Benji has brought up some more topics as well. Mark takes O-hit KOs and he plays Azarola. No need for dice. Okay. Most players don't pay enough attention to the opponent. This is a big one. So we talked about looking at their prize cards and their board and stuff like that already. So recognize the win condition of your opponent. You can see the direction of a game where it's going. So not just looking at their discard piles, but also looking at their board state, looking at their next 2 turns. What are they able to achieve? What will they be attacking with for the next 3 turns? What are the most awkward threats on their board? What are the most high priority targets? These are something you should be trying to manage. You can see where are their next 3 prizes coming from if they are a deck that wants to take prizes. That's obviously a big one, because if you know what they're trying to do, you know the best route to deny that from being possible. Check opponent's discard pile frequently, especially after a Sycamore. What has the opponent played already? So again, you can choose to play around and choose not to play around certain cards based on their discard piles. Especially now that we don't have Versus Seeker anymore. Count how many ends they have remaining. That's a big one. Energy in the discard pile. Rare candies in the discard pile. Lots of different things like this. Even in a losing game, sometimes pre-scooping, I will have one last search of my opponent's discard pile. Oftentimes I'll do it during their turn rather than during my own, because it's going to be more time efficient this way. Especially if they're shuffling. Oftentimes when my opponent is shuffling, that's a great window of opportunity for you to look at a discard pile. Because otherwise you are sat not doing much and you are just siphoning your own hand and just keeping yourself busy. But if you look at your opponent's discard pile while they're shuffling, oftentimes, still be looking at them, right? Don't just let them shuffle on their own and have no attention to them. You've got to be aware of these things, especially shuffling these days. But looking at people's discard piles when there's windows of not much action, that's always a good thing to do. Think about the worst case scenarios. If I do this, what would my opponent do in the worst case possible? Can I somehow do something different? Yeah, so this is more about the odds of these things happening based on what you know from their discard pile and what their board is already like. And focus on what your opponent does. Your opponent is a human and can make mistakes as well. You can give this a huge advantage. So I think that again is on body language and things outside the cards that are physically on the board. This is also an important one. We've already covered some of these topics, but these are all very important points to take home. Do you think it's worthwhile to test with decks other than your main to try and understand their win conditions? That's definitely something I do. Charizard. Definitely an important one, because you know the limitations of decks by playing them, right? I typically play most good decks anyway, or like most respected decks, because they could be a possibility for myself. I want to get to know their playstyle, and I think that's one of the best ways to do that, by physically playing it rather than playing against it. So you know what ideal turns look like, you know how far they can reach and stuff like that, you know where their limitations are. So this is important. Can you use an abacus to do damage calculations? I have no idea on that one. I have no idea, to be honest. You can't use a calculator, so I'm not sure why you'd want... I'm not sure how an abacus... I mean, an abacus is different to a calculator, but I think it would be classed as like... I don't think... like, obviously this is like a half troll question, half not, but I don't think you would be able to use an abacus. You can use your dice for these sorts of counts, though. Oftentimes, if it's Trash Launch damage and stuff like that, or Night March damage, you can use dice to indicate that for yourself. Anyway. Okay. Keeping the board state as clean and tidy, as clear as you do while playing. So Will was actually my stream judge when I was in America for the North American Internationals. But we've already covered this, making it as clear as possible to your opponent. This can be not just with talking, but also keeping your play area nice and tidy. Great for judges, great for yourself, great for the opponent. You can see instantly what is going on. This is helpful. I think some of the cool things you can use is the base set, or the easier to obtain evolutions energy cards, because they have physically a big box of energy. So it'll be always distinguishable to see how many energy are on different Pokemon. The new Pokemon cards, they have the really small bar that just has the little circle of energy. So they can sort of get hidden behind stuff. Oftentimes you don't want to do that, or you need to like physically have the card way outwards at times. And typically I have tools side on rather than on top of energy, like a stack, because sometimes people at a glance can look at a tool and think it's a double colorless and stuff like that. So typically just having the board state clean and tidy will help you and your opponent to see exactly what's going on. Ryan says, long listing coming. Okay. So order of operations, board state clarity, clear communication, prize card awareness, resource management. That also sort of ties back into discard piles and prize checking. You'll stack your energy to the left of the active and your tool to the right. Yeah, that works. That definitely works. I mean, everyone has their own different methods of doing it, but as long as it's clear, right, it doesn't really matter. There are objective ways of what's correct and stuff, but that's sort of been lost in translation a little while. So, pace of play, okay. Don't deliberate on your hand for an excessive amount of time, just to pass. Well, yeah, that's obviously not allowed. Risk management, what can I do in the worst case possible? That's interesting that Ryan and Benjamin both picked up on worst case scenarios. This comes back to what your opponent's deck is capable of and what's likely to happen in the next few turns. I think worst case scenarios is an interesting one. I think rarely I will think of the worst case. I will think of the most likely case. There are times when you can get high rolled the hell out of, but it's a 6-card combo that I don't think you ever should play around. And it's rare that you'll be able to play around super high rolling. But I think forcing them to have one more extra card if you do a decision one way rather than another is definitely something you should think about. So I guess working backwards from the worst possible case is a way of doing this. But oftentimes when I'm thinking about playing specific cards, you can think about how can it be punished? What's going to be the impact of every single card that I play? Stuff like this. There are also times in turns where you know for a fact you have to play X amount of cards, and then you're looking at other cards that you think, should I ever play these cards? Should I hold on to them for resources? Should I start clearing them away from my hand from N and trying to basically thin my deck as much as possible? That's sort of comes into these sorts of resource management, risk management type situations. So I do quite like this as a topic. How to prevent cheating. I mean, cool judges, right? Will's done it perfectly there. Carl Barone. From what you've learned so far, some of the big ones, checking discard pile, deck thinning when necessary. Yeah, deck thinning hasn't been talked about a lot here. I would have thought, like, for me, deck thinning is one of the biggest ones. I think naturally a lot of people do it, but in a world of N, deck thinning is important. It does sort of come to resource management, I guess, in like a broad spectrum, but oftentimes you need to know what's not important in a game and what can be simply burnt. It's one of the best things, like, it's a weird way to think about it, but every Pokemon deck would be so much better if they were 50 card decks, right? Because obviously the balance of everything would change, but every deck would be so much more consistent if it was 50 cards, right? So trying to thin your deck as much as possible will give you the highest odds to find the high quality cards, because you are physically taking away the chance of you drawing a card that isn't good. So the thinner the deck, the better the deck. And that's why you'll see lots of decks that pull things out of the deck become naturally way more consistent, because you have thinned from these sorts of things. It's like Vikavolt Tapu Bulu. It's a hideously inconsistent stage 2 deck, but if you high roll and get the Candy Vikavolt, your deck quality becomes so much better because you start using Strong Charge, so there physically aren't these literally junk cards. Energy are the worst cards you can draw into in the game once you've attached full turn. They physically do nothing for you, and they are very difficult to thin from your own hand without the help of Ultra Balls or other cards around it. So when you start naturally thinning your deck of these things, your deck quality becomes so much stronger, because you only have 3 or 4 blanks, essentially, you could call them, and the rest of your cards are doing cards, cards that you can play, item cards and supporter cards. So that's going to be important. Thing that really bothers you when they get end to low hand and put their cards face down without looking at them. Always plan out your turns. Look for win conditions with resources available. So not looking at their own hand after an N. I guess they're slowing the game down by not looking at their cards. Yeah, you probably should look at your cards, right? I guess some people do it in a sort of superstitious way, or for their own nerves' sake, they don't look at it. But yeah, you should see your cards immediately so you can start looking at all the different situations available to you, rather than just having a sort of snap look and saying, is this card exactly Guzma for game? No. Okay. So yeah, that's a good point from Luke. It's a tilting one for him. Stillwater fruit shoots are disgusting. Thanks for that. Good to know. Okay, get out of here. Okay. Sean says, when I Geomancy and start shuffling my deck afterwards, my opponent has steamed up 1,000 times, used 2 Lele and a Sycamore before I have confirmed where I'm attaching to. Well, Sean, you should actually confirm where you're attaching as you announce the Geomancy. So he's actually in the wrong there. But again, this sort of goes back to communication. Plaroth is now following. Your opponent can say, oh, can I start my turn? And you can say, no, wait for me, let me do my thing. Or you can say, yeah, dude, go ahead. I'm going to go to these 2 targets. By the way, if you're using Geomancy, you should name your targets. You should literally point to the 2 cards. And actually, you should point to one card first, then the other card. So you should go, I'm going to this target and this target, because there are times when you only want to search 1 energy, or you're only able to search 1 energy. And if you point to 2 directly, you can then only put 1 down or whatever, and you can say fail search on the other, but it's better for you to target 1 first, then the other. So if you are in a situation where there's only 1 available, you go to the first option first and the second option second. So that's actually his fault. But I know what he means. We've talked about pace of play. We've talked about communication. This is obviously your opponent, but you can literally, there's nothing wrong with you saying, can you just wait? What did you do there? Like, and things like having a dice for steam ups, having a dice for all these sorts of things can help you out. A lot of people turn their cards crookedly when they've used a ability. Some people flip burn and poison markers, the official acrylic ones. They have a white underside. Sometimes they put that on their Pokemon to signify that they've used a trade ability, for example. Some people put it 45 degrees, all that sort of stuff. It can, again, goes back to management of your board, making sure everyone knows what's going on. Very important stuff. So it is a good point, even though Geomancy... Luke, what does Geomancy do? Can't you fail search on the first one and then put an energy on the second? Well, it's all one search, right? I guess you can. I guess you can. Maybe that's just a PTCGO thing that I've learned. That you need to know which target to put onto first. Okay. Because, yeah, it matters on PTCGO at least. Okay. Started playing out the turn while you're processing Talonflame's Aero Blitz. I mean, I think that will happen. I think pace of play is one of these sorts of things. But oftentimes, like, for things like Sylveon and stuff, a lot of the time it's like people are trying to speed up the game and make you not waste time. And people can literally just show off an N and be like, yeah, I'm going to end this beacon or this magical ribbon because I really want to always. You shouldn't always do that, by the way. You should let people... I'm a firm believer of let your opponent conclude their action, especially for Beacon and Sylveon, because you can top deck, and you can top deck a card and be like, well, I don't want to end now, or like, oh, I actually drew Guzma, so showing them an end can give them information, and it can be baiting, right? It's actually like really wrong to do these things. So you should probably let your opponent conclude, but I understand where people are coming from in that they can be shuffling and then they've already started their turn and you can be like, yeah, dude, go ahead, and then remind them to cut your deck again when their turn continues. Some people naturally want to get on with the game ASAP and you just sort of have to let them do that, but again, it all comes back to knowing what's going on at all times, and there's nothing wrong with you saying, can you just wait? You can do that. Shay, my man, how's it going? Okay, Xander. It's very funny when I see my opponent slightly raise their head. Okay, so this is the Guzma thing. Yeah. Giving away unnecessary information with body language. It's something we have covered a little bit. Huffing, puffing, talking physically, or just almost... Some people look like physically in pain when they're doing searches that aren't right or whatever. Shaking their head, getting angry. It's all stuff that you can... I just let them draw their card and then ask if they have an N. Yeah. If they start their turn and you're still magical ribboning, is it all right if it is inform? It could inform your magical ribbon. Yeah, that's so. As I said, I would always let my opponent conclude their search because if they're still actually searching their deck, typically, like I think I think the borderline is if they're shuffling. I think if they've chosen their free targets, they've gone to their hand and they start shuffling. I think that's probably a prompt for you to begin, and then you can just cut when they're ready. But as you said, you should never do it if they're still deciding, because their decision could change if they've seen, oh boy, there's choice band DCE. I don't want to get myself max potion because he's hit the nuts, right? Stuff like that. So if they have N, I let them play out their turn while I am ribboning. They shouldn't. Like the Asian style of stacking energies. I don't know how they do their energies. They sort of do them sideways and climb upwards. They like they make a building, right? They go like the attacker's here and energy goes like this, I think. from what I've seen at least. That's pretty cool. That's also where I always put tools like this. I don't know, Mark could be onto something else though. Do you like the hand gestures, by the way? But yeah, I've been sidetracked. Yeah, this whole body language thing is something that you should take note of against certain players for sure. After losing a game in best of 3, thinking about what you could do better in the next game, or thinking adapting to tech cards. Also reviewing what you could have done better after losing, winning, and not being immediately like, bad matchup, never lucky. Excuses everywhere. Yeah, so this is something me and him were actually talking about. You put it on top of the Pokemon on the very... Oh, yeah. On the very bottom. On the very bottom. Wait. I don't know what he means. I need more explanation. But yeah, me and Tim were actually talking about this a little bit earlier. That alternate win conditions and finding paths in matchups that are likely bad and stuff like that is really important. And finding a plan B, or finding alternate win conditions, scouting, or identifying new lines of play. This is something that oftentimes you will learn this during testing, I find. Going into games with a rough game plan. Now this is actually dangerous to... I say a rough game plan very specifically because a lot of the time nothing goes to plan in Pokemon, right? Because it's an RNG based game, you're not going to have this on 1, this on 2, this on 3, this on 4, but you'll have ideal turns at times, and you'll know what you're striving for. You'll know what's going to be the most damaging to people. Joe's a genius. He's too nice. Yeah, so having a general game plan, knowing what's strong against other decks, knowing the decks in the format is important to know how to beat them. And your own deck, you should pretty much be familiar with what you're going up against and what's going to be most damaging to them, what's going to make it as easy for you to win as consistently as possible. So that's going to be really important to do, but don't be so rigid to this. So remain flexible when things go to pot. So when you miss this, that, or the other, when you have a bad opening hand and can't do anything for turns 1 and 2, how can you keep yourself in the game as likely as possible? How can you still pressurize your opponent, still put them into awkward spots? Can you try and Guzma for the sake of forcing them to have an out, make it difficult for them to take a KO on you? Can you start attaching energy? Do you have enough turns to maybe start throwing energy drives their face to keep pressurizing them, set up KOs for later on? Are there any of these things that you can do? Can you pay retreat to make it more difficult and maybe preserve a more important Pokemon in the bench, stuff like that? All these sorts of things you have to be aware of, and you should never really be set in your ways. Like, I should, because I've won this matchup previously by doing this, I should always do this. It's always individual to the board state, right? But that's not to say that there aren't going to be patterns in games because you've played this matchup 10 times. But being flexible during the game, always judging the board state at the time, rather than being set in your ways saying, aha, Turtonator is what I always use against Gardevoir because he is the best attacker against Gardevoir. If you are missing these sorts of cards during the game, you can't just start defeating yourself saying, okay, I can't do anything. And you need to adapt. You need to start, attaching to your baby Volk on the bench to use its second attack, Steam Artillery, stuff like that, you know? You need to definitely adapt. You need to start stacking up to Tapu Lele on Volcanion in Volk decks. That's something specifically that I find really weird, that so few people stack energy onto Tapu Lele as Volk players. It's like such a rare occasion that I ever see it, but whenever I play Volk, I like do it a lot. It's weird. But yeah, having backup plans and stuff like that going forward is always important. And finding alternate win conditions and stuff like that is always important. Really judging the board state itself is as important as all the games of prior testing that you did to know what's painful against them in general. So I think that is good. And also, this sort of defeatist mentality that he's talking about is something you should never have. You need to take round by round, game by game. So, not mentality. I guess it is sort of mentality. If not, why haven't you scooped? Yeah, that's true, Luke, that's true. But sometimes not scooping is also correct. True. Crush the hand during the pre-game handshake for mind games. Throw the game plan. Throw out the plan. So, yeah. Getting triggered and stuff like that is something that there's no place for that like, it's never going to help you ever. There's never going to be a way that getting angry helps a card game. Obviously, it's natural knee-jerk reactions at times, but even getting angry or showing these signs can actually tip you further away from winning the game, because we're going back to giving people unnecessary information. So you need to be as pragmatic as possible and not really be emotionless, but remain calm and always be trying to play as best you can. And that comes down to even pre-tournament preparation. You hear so often about rituals that people have about having a good night's sleep, having a good meal. All these things do go towards your good mentality. Luke is one of the worst players I've known in my life for the amount of sleep that he gets and the physical endurance aspect of Pokemon and the mental strain it does have on you. There's literally been tournaments where I've got to a top cut stage and I just feel dead because I was up too late the night before testing with Luke, and that's something I want to change. So yeah, always go for deck out. Iced fingers and Pepsi, Jesus. Till 5. Yeah, I mean, you've got to sort of plan to succeed, right? You need to put yourself in the best place possible, and your brain will be at its best with more hours sleep, fuel in your body, and hydration as well is a big one. I always drink a lot of water. I always have a big bottle like this that I will fill up throughout a tournament, and I get through a lot of water at tournaments. Eating wise, I mean, if there aren't lunch breaks, oftentimes Pokemon events don't run like clockwork, so it's not always easy. But trying to fit in snacks can really be helpful. Sometimes bringing some energy bars or even just chocolate and stuff like that, fruit and stuff, you can bring that with you. Even things like polos or mints or chewing gum, that can always help out. It can give you, it can sort of perk you up and really liven you up and stuff like that. So I think that is always really important, and sleep is a big factor that's always, I don't know, for some reason there are really weird stigmas around Pokemon. You hear a story of a player who came up with a deck at 4 in the morning after testing for 8 hours straight or something, and then they end up succeeding, and everyone's like, oh, that's what we should do. We should come up with the crazy 10 AM deck. And we just slept for 2 hours and still ended up winning. But, Todd, you could do something. Oh, Todd, god damn it. What's going on here? Okay, man, sidetracked again. But yeah, getting as much sleep as possible, I think, is way better than those tales. It's less glamorous saying that you've slept 10 hours and knew your deck a week before, but it's probably more on average it's going to do better for you than the 10 a.m. 5-card changes that you made to break the metagame for this tournament. And when you hear about people having like 3 decks available and they're still writing out different deck lists on the day itself, I think that's crazy. A serial offender of this is actually Alex Dow. He always ends up doing well anyway. And I think there are exceptions to the game, people who can get away with it, but I think in general, as a rule of thumb, you shouldn't be doing these sorts of things. So yeah, if you feel like you can get away with it, fair enough, but it's not something I would ever endorse and say to other people as something to do. So yeah, that is going to be it for the Facebook questions. There are a few other things that I wanted to talk about a little bit. So declumping is one of the biggest ones that I feel. It feels like everyone in that chat, apart from, I think it was one person who talked about declumping and improving the quality of your deck itself during a game. So often you hear about using resources wisely and keeping hold of resources, but I think a lot of the time people hold on to too many cards and can lose the game because they haven't played out as many cards as possible. Oftentimes you can do things in strange sequences to burn as many cards as possible, and I think that is really important at times. Things like field blowing your own stadium to replay your stadium so that you have less cards available to you. I think that's actually one of the reasons why Garbodor was so prevalent in its time, was because people can't deck thin as appropriately, so they get punished by N a lot more because they were holding on to items this whole time because they were worried about Trash Avalanche, you know? It's one of those hidden things that the power of Garbodor was always, it can get one-hit KOs and it's crazy and it's powerful. But yes, that was a factor, but also if people are trying to play around the damage, the quality of their deck is so much worse. So it really is a catch-22 type card, and why it's still probably quite powerful. My chat's crazy delayed. God damn. Do I need to check this? What's my opinion on people that use notebooks? What notes should be... what are some good notes that should be taken? Yeah, I've said it is mad that people don't use notebooks. For my last 3 tournaments that I went to, I used notebooks for prize checking. And typically it was prize checking. Typically it was a tech card that I had to remember. I remember against certain players, I wrote things down like 3rd Field Blower or 2nd Parallel City and stuff like this. Some things that stick out to you when looking at your opponent's discard pile or your own discard pile. These things are important. But I would say more often than not, prize checking is the main one that you should do. And for some reason, there's a stigma around using a notepad and pen. But as long as you learn how to prize check efficiently and quickly, there's no reason to not do it. So going back to prize checking, actually, I'm going to go through my habit of how I prize check. I'm not sure this is the most efficient way, and maybe even there are people in the chat who do it better than me. But this is what I do. Typically, I go through energy cards first. And if I play... so essentially, you look at your own hand. First of all, you take away your own hand cards, right? So you have 2 Darkness Energy in... So, for example, you're playing Xerneas. You're playing 4 DCE and 7 Fairy. So what you're going to do... Well, that's not right for Xerneas. You're going to play 10 Energy, 10 Fairy. So you look at your own deck... sorry, you look at your own hand. How many are in your hand? This is your starting hand if you've done an opening Ultra Ball for Bridget or whatever. You have 2 Fair Energy in your opening hand, so you already count 0, 2. And then you go along through your deck, and you go 1, 3, 1, 4, 2, 4, 2, 5, 2, 6, 2, 7, 2, 8, 3, 8, 3, 9, for example. And what I mean by this is you are counting DCs and fairies at the same time, right? So this is a bad Xerneas list. Notebooks for writing school essays while I promote my Pokemon. That's great. So essentially, I'm counting two different things at once, right? I'm counting DCs and fairies as I go along, but I'm counting them both. And so when I say 2-5, it means that at this point in my deck search, I've seen 2 DCEs and 5 fairy energies, and that's combined with my hand. So by the time I get to the end of my deck search, I know 3-8, so I have, or 3-9, I've prized 1 of each of my energy cards. So once you've done energy, you can take a note of what has been prized, and then you go to Pokemon. Pokemon, similar subject. We're playing 4 Xerneas, 3 Breaks, 4 Lele's, 1 Oranguru. Let's go as simple as possible. And essentially, this is really down to knowing your deck. And before a tournament, you should be able to recite your own deck list completely. And not only recite it completely, I always recite it in the same order. This was actually something where this happened in the second tournament I ever went to. Someone lost my deck list, right? One of the judges lost my deck list that I handed in. And I then rewrote it out. And then 2 rounds later, they found my deck list, and it was identical. Every card was in the same place as it was the first time I wrote it. And that's because when I'm doing my deck searches, this was like the second time I ever went to a tournament as well. This is something that sort of like stuck with me. I do my counts differently now than I did back then. But I've always had this thing where I could read out my deck list in my head the night before a tournament, like quite easily. So again, we're going along. These are our total cards. We started as Xerneas, so we start 1, and then we go, okay, 2, 1, 2, 1, 0, 0, and then you go 2, 1, 1, 1, or 2, 1, 1, 0, 2, 1, 1, 0, etc., etc. So you're counting all of your Pokemon at once, right? So these are Xerneas, these are your Breaks, these are your Lele's, this is Guru. And as you see these Pokemon, you're keeping this. I use this as an example just because it's super easy to do a Xerneas deck, right? But as you're doing this, you go from front to back, or back to front doing your energies, and then you go back to the front of your deck and start again. So you start doing the Pokemon counts again, you look at your hand, sometimes you can look at it again if you forgot what's in your hand, look at what you started with, etc. Add those up, and then you start going, okay, so far I'm at 1, so I could be at 1, 0, 1, 0 if I've just started Xerneas and Lele'd. So you can start going for that, and then as you count, you can go 2, 0, 1, 0, 3, 0, 1, 0, 3, 1, 1, 0, 3, 1, 1, 1, and essentially you can, once you hit a target, you can take away the thing. So as soon as you see your Guru, you can stop adding that to your count. As soon as you see this, you can do it. But as long as you're keeping to the pattern, it's so much easier to remember X, like number. And there are different decks where it's going to be easier for you to do this. There are certain one-ofs that are important. Oftentimes, you can stick out one-ofs that are important as well. Item cards, I typically go supporters first. So typically I'm pretty quick at doing these ones. These are quite easy ones to stick out to see what's prized. Supporters are also super easy these days because people only really play like 5 different supporters. Sycamores, Ents, Guzmas, Bridgets, and Acerolas, right? So you can go, okay, so I have 4 N, 4 Sycamore, 4 Guzma, 2 Bridget, right? So you can go, you know, 1, 1, 1, 0, or yeah, you start 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 2, 1, 1, 0, 2, 2, 1, 0, 2, 2, 1, 1, stuff like that, right? It's pretty quick, and typically I then basically as you're doing this, it's not like you're not paying attention to the other cards, but you're only physically counting the other stuff. Stuff will be sticking out to you as well when you do your first search. I know there are people who do a general sift through before even doing any of these counts. I think time-wise it's not right because the energy cards are so easy to track. But whilst you're doing these things, you're also seeing patterns, right? By the third time you've gone from back to front, you know the position of certain cards, and you know, like, you've seen sorts of items a few times over at this point. So even though you've not started counting your items, there'll be patterns that start emerging. So if you're trying to be quick, by the way, there are games when you don't want to prize check. If it's game, if it's like game free and stuff, sometimes you just have to race and literally restrain yourself to a general search, see what's stuck out to you as being weird, and then you check main attackers and main tech cards if it's Field Blower against a Galbator, stuff like that. How many Guzmas do you have? These ones are always important when you only have like 30 seconds and you're trying to be quick. But in a first turn search situation, you'll probably go through all of these things. And once you've done your prize checking as well, it's important to tick off prizes that you take. So then you get to items. Items is the hardest one. Sometimes you can separate it between tools and items and do it like this, depending on how stringent your deck is. But again, it's the same pattern where you're going to go, okay, my deck plays 2 Stretcher, 2 Blower, 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Choice Bands, 4 Max Elixirs, and what else does Xerneas play? Sometimes EXP Shares or E-Hammers, stuff like that. 4 Ferrigons. So you can do this in a similar route, and it is harder to do it like this because it gets to so many. Typically I'll break this up. As I said, I'll go for tools, I'll go for items, I'll try and be more rapid on these. And oftentimes, once you've done Pokemon Energy supporters, it's a process of elimination. Sometimes at this point you're at items, and there's only 2 prizes that you've not discovered yet. And oftentimes you don't actually have to do this, because there'll have been cards that stick out. So oftentimes, because items are the hardest, you do them last because you've already seen the deck 3 times, and it's really easy to spot the remaining cards. Sometimes there can only be like 1 or 2 left, and you can be like, oh, I've realized that I only have 1 Blower in deck, and that'll just stick out to you and be like, done, happy days. I would always say that do items last, because typically items are the highest portion of your deck, and they are in weird counts oftentimes as well, like 1 or 2 ofs. Things like the 1 of Special Charge, or the 1 of Rescue Stretcher, the 1 of this, the 1 of that. So I would say this is the order that's probably best, because you can eliminate a good number of cards before you even get to the hard part. So at this point, oftentimes you don't need to do the strategy that I just did, unless you have still like 4 prize cards remaining to decipher, and then it becomes difficult for you. But I think in general, I think this part definitely, you can easily get this down to a minute, like easily, because this is just sifting and counting. Also, when you're doing this, don't talk with your mouth. Don't go 1 1 1 2 1 1. Don't 1 1 1 1 2 1 3 1 4. Do it in your head, please. Don't mumble it. That was something that I did when I first started doing this method, and it was really bad. I had friends have to tell me to not do that because it was obvious to people. Obviously, you don't want to do that. So yeah, I feel like I could quite easily, I can do this in less than a minute, these 3. Sometimes these are hard to decipher. Sometimes it's actually a good process before a tournament begins to actually get a few attempts in at trying to clear away and decipher prizes. I've done an exercise a few times with different decks. Literally just shuffle up. It's like adding to your goldfishing. You know how last week I was talking about doing solo games against yourself? Oftentimes, one of the things you can do is when you draw your opening hand, you also draw 6 prizes, and then as you progress through your first turn, then you do your prize checks as well. So training yourself to do prize checking, I think, is important and really useful. And I think for me in future, I'll always be bringing, well, at least for important events, I'll be bringing a notepad and pen and making it work for me. I think, yeah, really important. Especially, again, like as a commentator, how often I talk about prize cards and how much they can influence games from what I've seen. It makes me super aware of how much they do change games, to the point where I think it's hugely important to always know what's available and whatnot. There are times when I've done really, really greedy lines of play because I know that I have a 66% chance to take a draw supporter off of this prize that will keep me in the game, right? If you can be in a bad spot, you can use these percentages to your favor. In a similar way that you can do percentages to give yourself the best chance of drawing into stuff, you can use your prizes as a resource as well that you can tap into. How is taking notes acceptable when going through deck one time too many is a prize penalty? I understand it's down to going as quickly as possible. Also, what can happen is you can do your opening search, and for example, with Tapu Lele, especially, oftentimes you'll Ultra Ball. This is your opening search. It's going to be a long search. If you feel like you're taking too much time, you can stop during the process, and then you can grab yourself your Bridget off of a Wonder Tag, and then you can finish off on supporters and just end up doing the rest and carry on with your turn. I think it's generally accepted in Game 1 that a longer search is pretty much mandatory. I know that you're given the sort of like lively pace of play, 1 minute is sort of tops for deck searching, which is really weird, by the way. I don't know why that is the case, because it's so important. But I think most people won't pressure you on the first search. I think if you're consistently doing it on every search, it gets a little ridiculous. I think once you've done your opening search, from then on, it should just be little reminders as you go during the game. But if you have a notepad, you shouldn't need many reminders. Joe is so prepared and still does so poorly. Feels bad, man. I mean, this season, what have I done? I've top 32'd Anaheim. I came 34th in Liverpool, and I had a good enough record to make top 32. I top 32'd Bremen, and I come second in the League Cup, and then I've done poorly in 2 other League Cups, but I don't really care about League Cups anymore. So the tournaments I've played, I've done reasonable. Wasting time deck searching is only okay if you waste time writing as well. So people stop complaining. So poorly. Thanks, Mark. That's kind of you. But I think top 32ing is pretty much always the goal of a top level player at big tournaments. I think once you achieve that goal, then you go on to further things. I'm not saying that I'm flawless. I'm just saying that these are habits that you want to execute. This is me, obviously. I'm not saying I do all these habits right now. I'm saying I'm aware of them as much as possible. Maybe I'm thinking about too much during a game and not actually just playing the game. But yeah, prize checking, pretty good stuff. What else are we looking at? What else are things that I want to pick up on and give tips? By the way, is there anyone in chat who does prize checking differently to my method? Are there other more efficient ways? Is this a way that you've not heard of before? Is it one that you think is generally, this is the one that most people do? What do you think? What's a good website to use to get deck lists from? Limitless TCG is probably one of the best websites you can get stuff. Also, the Charizard Lounge. You imagine Joe cheering you on when you play. Maybe you should wear a watch. Yes, Todd, you should. You should. It's really weird that we're all aware of these things, and for whatever reason, we just don't do it. Limitless and Charizard Lounge, that's it. Those are probably 2 of the better ones. I think there's what's it called? Oh man, what's this website called? I'm gonna just search it quickly. Lysander Labs, that's it. Lysander Labs is another good one that has a lot of deck lists, and they consolidate lots of other they consolidate a lot of information that's out there. And also, I think, what's their name? Someone's PC are getting a little bit better at that as well. So yeah. Normally it seems like it doesn't matter for you. Wow. I really just have to disagree with that in general, TechnoKid. It just doesn't seem right. I know you prioritize certain cards, but I think in general, obviously gaining the full picture is optimal, right? No one's going to argue that if everyone could do it in under a minute, everyone would do it, right? and you can teach yourself about it, but really, you can definitely get this time down. It's like I don't know, learning how to do a Rubik's Cube, right? You start off, it takes you maybe an hour to learn the algorithms in the first place. Then you're doing it then you like stop watching the tutorial, start doing it yourself in about 10 minutes, and people can grind themselves down to 1 minute, people can grind themselves down to 10 seconds. That's never going to be possible with prize checking in Pokemon, but you can probably get yourself down to a minute on at least the top 3, and then, as you say, the important ones are these. But it shouldn't be too strenuous. People think of it as an impossible task, and it's really not impossible. It's really not impossible. I think what I was saying last week as well about getting as many IRL games in as possible will help you naturally train this skill as well, rather than PTCGO. One of the big benefits of IRL games is that you can do these a lot more, which is a skill that needs to be trained. What's the deal with sequencing? Is there a method that can be learned? I feel like a newer player, it's something I get wrong a lot due to overexcitement. I would say in general, when you're looking at your hand, typically what I think about is cards that will always be played and cards that won't always be played. And you can identify the cards that you need to keep in your hand and the cards that you don't need to keep in your hand. And typically, draw for your turn and look at your entire hand. Look at what you're trying to achieve that turn. Look at where you're trying to go, what path gets you there most likely, or the way to guarantee yourself that path in that direction. Don't just play cards for the sake of playing cards. Don't just play the Ultra Ball, and then think, oh, what do I actually discard from this Ultra Ball? Oh man, I actually don't. Did I want to play this in the first place? Like, stuff like that. You should always draw and have a little pause. I think typically that's where you're going to make your most decisions, when you draw and you look at your hand and think, and then you sort of sit there for like maybe 10 seconds if it's a hard turn or whatever, 15 seconds, and then you start going into your sequence. Then you start playing the cards down and seeing what happens. But yeah. So many 4-ofs. You had about 5 cards to check on, Scott. Well, Warlord's an interesting one, because you actually really need to... Checking prizes is actually like pretty important in a deck like that, because you'll never actually gain access to them. So, mill decks struggle. I think it's more important for mill decks to know what exactly is prized. I think Sable Garb is one where you just throw it out the window. I don't think I'd ever prize check Sable Garb fully. I think that's a deck where you exactly look for things like Puzzles of Time, Life Dew, your Float Stones, your Garbodor, and then things like Trick Shovel, your individual supporters. Like, there's so much to keep track of for Sable Garb, it's almost impossible. Is there a rule of thumb when to use techs for certain matchups or stick to consistency? I think this isn't really a good habits topic. I think that can only really be discovered through playing games. I think that's more like a metagame discussion, really. I would say if you think your deck can't beat another deck without teching, and you feel like you need to beat that matchup a decent amount of the time, and you think the tech is non-invasive enough that it's worth playing, then the answer is yes. But it's a lot of different factors go into teching. Saxon candies. Okay, so is there anything else that we feel in chat that hasn't really been brought on? Definitely taking time to pause and knowing what you're trying to do in your turn what you're trying to achieve overall in a turn is what really you need to stop and think about. Another one is actually just have a reason for playing the cards that you're playing. So often you see people, definitely newer players as well, they rigidly think because you can attach an energy a turn, you should always, and because you can play a supporter each turn, you should always. And that's not always the case. It's always based on board state. It's always individual, case by case. So I can't really tell you what the best sequencing is. I can tell you that knowing how to change your percentages of hitting cards It's something you should be aware of all the time. It's something you should talk about. Would I play Tina in a promo in Decidueye Zoroark in the current meta? For what reason? Even Tina promo can't save that matchup. So, yeah, this is like, I guess this is a decent example. Giratina promo in theory is quite a non-invasive tech that can auto-win a matchup in some situations. Towards saying Tina promo can't save that matchup. I think that could potentially be true, but I mean their damage is absolutely nothing, I guess. It gives you so many turns to draw out of it. I don't know if Tina promo would fix it, but maybe in a different deck. For example, like Silvally Metals, would you play Tina promo in that? And it comes down to a few factors. It comes down to how many Greninjas you think you'll see in a day. Does this one tech detract from the strategy too much? For example, if you're an all-basic deck, you probably have more space and more inherent consistency to start thinking about tech cards. Whereas if you're a stage 2 deck, you pretty much want to be as streamlined as possible because you can't afford to have extra jank on top of what is already a deck that needs to be as consistent as possible. That's why Mr. Mime isn't like an auto-include into Gardevoir, even though it is weak to devolve strategies and Buzzwole. People still debate it because it's one card that isn't, you know, an extra support or a second Bridget, these sorts of slots. So it is case by case. Yeah, based on how popular the deck you're trying to tech for is, how bad your matchup is already. Is it winnable just based on a different style of play rather than teching for it, almost like adding a win more card to the situation. Maybe there's different lines that you thought of that, or maybe there are lines that you didn't think of that you could try out to see if it's even worth going for in the first place. Have I covered the importance of positive visualization before games? Do you have an opinion on that? Maybe links to pre-game prep. I've talked about mentality during games and stuff like that, and trying to take everything game by game. And I think having a goal in tournaments is always important. So I do think this is something I probably should write down more. So having goals for the event itself before beginning the day, knowing what's required, what records are required, or what's likely at least to get you towards the finishing line. Staying positive is important. I think round by round is still the best mentality that works for me. Game by game, round by round. Be in the moment as much as you can be. Don't be sat there thinking about your last game where you missed this one card and think, man, that's just my luck. This happened to me 2 weeks ago as well, blah, blah, blah. I think you really do need to move on from these things. That is what the game's all about, right? So there is tons of RNG involved. So round by round is important. And a lot of the time, sort of, one of the best ways to... Something that always happens, right? In between rounds, you'll always catch up with friends and say what's going on and how it's going, all that stuff. And sometimes venting can also be a great way to clear your head of these things and help people move on. Oftentimes, I don't really like venting too much. I never really get that emotionally attached. I guess I kind of do get salty. The only time I get annoyed is when I know my record's done, right? Until then, I'm still thinking like, okay, now I just got to win out. Now I just got to do this, that, the other. I think there are times when people do naturally vent. Typically, if I'm venting, it's because of, I don't know. I should do this less maybe. But you'll all know people who vent more than others and talk about RNG a lot. But yeah, venting can definitely help a lot of people get rid of this sort of stuff, and you can then put it to the side and move on to the next game. I think that is good. What a troll. What a troll. Oh god, yeah. The thrill. The thrill. The thrill. I'm thinking, now that I, one of the things that I actually do on my videos is that I don't prize check often enough, and it actually comes up in my videos. Typically it's because I'm trying to save time, but I think it's probably better for players if I start incorporating these into all of my videos as much as possible. It's obviously better for myself as well, so I think it's something I need to be more aware of, and something I should be communicating more when I play games. So it's hard when I'm streaming, so I'm already distracted 10 times over, and oftentimes I see the stream as different from testing. It's normally entertainment for me. So I'm not taking it as seriously as I would do in real tournaments and stuff. But perhaps I should try and go more close to the mark so that I'm not just wasting my own time, and also it could potentially be better for you guys as well. But trying to think of all these things at once, oftentimes it can come down to one factor that outweighs another, but oftentimes you are thinking about all these things. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers most of it. Luke, I never get frustrated or angry. Just start smoking. That's a great tip, kids. I'm joking, obviously. But yeah, that's Luke's that's Luke's approach. Okay, I think that's enough chatter for today. I can't think of much else unless there are other topics that people want to talk about and bring on. I'm happy to keep talking about this, but I think I've pretty much exhausted it, and it has sort of been repeated a couple of times over at this point. Prize check night march. It's taking ages. What's going on here? Uh-oh. Yeah, it's lagging. The wheel. Stream's not over, man. I'll just jump onto the PTCGO for an hour or so. And not prize check at all, and not look at discard piles. Should I do it for a demonstration, not look at my prizes or discard pile? Just to see see how less informed our decision is, and see how often it could catch us out. I should do that. Let's do that. Let's play a game where we don't know, when we actively try not to look at our own stuff. And see, so when there's been people in the chat saying it doesn't matter too much and there are just certain things we should look at. I'm going to go through playing this. So I actually don't even know what my list is. So this is actually even better. We come up against Azul. And we're not allowed to prize check or do anything. You have a good deck. I don't know what mine is. I don't know how good mine is, but let's see. Okay, this is fun. Oh, I'm gonna have to swallow my pride now. Oh dear. Dearie me. YOLO Swaggins. Shouldn't be looking at that mulligan either. Should just thrown it away. Clown Fiesta is back. This is where we're going to win, and all of this is going to go down the drain. Mirror. Mirror, mirror on the wall. So I'm not going to look at his discard pile either. So we're going to try and keep track as best we can, just naturally, but... Battle of the Streams. Well, I'm actively trying to play badly. Well, worse, I guess. He's playing the wrong Zorua. Max potions are pretty important in the matchup. Grass Energy is also pretty important. Swaginator 5000 is now following. Thank you. So don't look, just snap Lele. Snap Bridget. These are the cards I want. Bait a Guzma on a Rowlet. And pass. Day to misplay like crazy. I'm doing it, man. I'm not allowed to look at either discard pile, and I don't know what's prized. And I don't know what list this is, because I've been playing like 3 different lists of Decidueye. These are the match stop streaming for the day. I wouldn't mind that, to be honest. What did discard? I didn't even see it. Is there a wrong / right Zorua? Well, in this deck, I'm assuming, unless he plays Rainbow Energies, he won't have access to Moonless Madness, so it would be correct to use the Ram one. Seeing these ones means he probably plays Rainbows. No Scuzma. So, the ping here means that next turn with 2 birds, he can put this to 60 and Riotous Beating for 150 to KO it. So I'm probably going to have to max potion this 20 off this turn before my N. So I can't play the Ultra Ball. Now we've already lost 1 N, and his board is way better than ours. But we need to develop as many birds as possible, so I will just Sycamore here. I don't know how many N's we've prized, but this could be a really bad decision, but who knows. I don't think we have any Pokemon on a discard pile that we can get rid of. Oh, we actually do have the Decidueye. So we can Candy Desi, Ultra Ball away Grass, and Bridget and grab Zoroark. Okay. Memory games. My memory is too good. Broken. We need to dig into double colorless if possible. We actually don't have enough playable cards here, right? I don't want to get rid of a Zorua. He's too powerful. We've just lost 1. Not having a DC is not actually terrible here because he'll just max potion anyway. So I might just go without attacking here and without trading. Right, don't look. Just snap this guy. Gonna put it on the active. Similar reasoning he had. Just pass. Timeable, nice. I guess Timeable could be considered better than Evo Soda because of the rare candies that he plays. Two Decidueyes, 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Don't think he can KO us still. Yeah, he can go to 200. with the choice band on the bench one. Yeah, he's just going to go active. So I think he'll be pinging Zorua, or maybe one on each. I could see one on each. I don't really like this too much. It forces a max potion, but he knows we play them. Okay, yeah, the spread is fine. Single Sycamore hand. Yeah, no one plays peeping. So we do have some trades available. Those are some pretty awkward trades, huh? We're not going to attack here. Don't ever want to attack Decidueye. Don't ever really want to attack with Lele. I think we hold all of these. Get me attacking, I guess, forces potential Acerola. The 120, okay. We're gonna be burning DCs anyway. We may as well get it in. Seeing as though the attachment's so weak all over the board, we may as well just force him to make plays. Okay. This is amazing. So we don't have access to the max potion just yet. We'll have 2 big birds next turn and a Guzma available. Do I want to put myself into a Guzma position? This isn't close enough to being knocked out by Bird Snipe, so I guess we attack it with the active. Oh no, this is... he still has his attack, right? Because these are Decidueye pings. So we don't want to give him any of our small birds. We want to give him the Lele, I think. Does sort of put us into a Guzma. It sort of forces us to Guzma a little bit. He could easily Guzma us as well, of course. If I go for the attack, surely I use Band. First of all, I'm thinking this is always going to be removed. I guess I play for... I want to keep Band for when it can actually remain on a Zoroark. I don't want to just get the 30 in. I don't know, maybe it's wrong there. Okay, protecting the Zoroark without a max potion. So I'm not going to Evo Soda because we'll have higher odds to draw into another Decidueye for a Candy. Do we discard the Dartrix in order to do this? Yes. Oh no, we discard one of our rare candies, obviously. Oh boy. This is where we find out that we prized our other Decidueye. No, we didn't. What a surprise. Yeah, it feels good, man. Okay. So, a Guzma without energy isn't happening. An N is going to be happening. We'll do this. Guzma plus Hollow Hunt is interesting, but I don't know what I want in my discard. I don't know how many Floatstones he's been through or how many Guzmas he's been through, so a stalling Guzma, I'm unsure of how effective it will be. It could be our best line, so then he goes down to 2 prizes, most likely Guzmaing this, and then we can try and end him out the game with like a devolve play the following turn. Maybe that's our best line, you know. 3 pings. Yeah, I kind of like it. For like a big swing comeback turn with an Espeon. He has this to stand in with, but I don't mind that being in the active if I'm just going to devolve everything else that's important anyway. Right, let's see what's in the discard pile. I want this. I want this. And I probably want that Guzma back. Or do I just want... what's on my board? Cheating, I'm looking at my discard pile, I know. I probably just want the Ultra Ball, to be honest. Or maybe just another N to guarantee. Don't know what's prized, so... It might just be the Guzma again. So I can guarantee the Espeon in the active. Yeah, this seems fine. Chelsky, how's it going? Let's see how much healing Azul plays. I don't think I've seen any yet. I can't remember though. There goes a timer ball. I cheated by looking through my discard with the GX attack. Okay, it's going to be the old stand-in. Ye olde standy-inny. Boom. So we can devolve 3 prizes here. Which looks pretty good. It's got to be with a Guzma instead of an N, which is the most annoying thing here. Unless I top deck into exactly Floatstone. Three, 6, 9, 12. Ooh, that's a big draw. That could keep us alive. So I think it's better for us to deal with this one than this. Because Because it's getting rid of energy. I know his hand size is large, but it takes away energy. Let's shine bright like a diamond. And get to see what prizes we actually have. Who knows? Good thing we got that Guzma back from the prize cards, huh? We prized a Zoroark, didn't even know it, didn't recycle it with Stretcher. So he can stand in and do a lot of damage here with a ping. 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 15. Let's see if he can get there with more choice bands. Again, can't remember how many he's been through. Another Zorua coming down. Or maybe he's thinning it. Who knows at this point? He didn't promote... Ooh, wow. So I think he'll be using his GX attack here. Special charge. If he GX attacks, I can just deal with the Zoroark though. Weird. Oh, Floatstone. Okay. So it sounds like this where I want to know how many DCs he has left. He did just special charge. I'm going to see a wonder tag. It's going to grab N. Okay. Just to get on the bench, I think, for damage, it looks like. Floatstone's pretty good here. Devolve plus N is very, very risky. But it might still be our best line. It's a clear choice if we get a max potion energy off of our 3-card N. A Guzma stall with the amount of hand size he has, and we know he has Mind Jack Zoroark, is bad. So it can never be Guzma. I think we're always Floatstoning the active here. And we're always playing the N. Also, choice bands and Rowlets don't help. I don't rip the max pot. We're still technically out of range as long as this isn't an energy card. So we just have to go for the devolve route, I think. I don't know what's prized, so I don't know the chances of pulling a max potion off the top. Otherwise, that would be something we could look at. So I think we just have to ping, ping, devolve, ping. Or ping, 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 devolve. And hope that he doesn't have energy after just special charging some back. Do I ever put down Rowlet here? I don't think I have any Decidueyes left in the deck. Can't be certain though. Where does that other ping go? We know we have Guzmas. Choice banding. Trying to draw into a Guzma plus energy isn't very good. We can't like top deck Guzma for game or anything. So I guess we still target the 60 HP stuff so we can maybe rip more prize cards. The Rowlet's less likely to be evolved, I think, but he has discarded a Zoroark at some point in the game. I guess we'll just do this. And hope for no energy in his hand. Or a supporter in his hand. Do I play any of these cards? I'm not sure how many of these he's been through, but I think I might just start putting one down. Still have Ultra Ball outs though. Okay. Good luck us. But he has, well, yeah. He's going to have trades available to him and a ping. Dangerous times. Oh, nice. See, that's one of those things where you would see other players just snapped aside to re-evolve the Decidueye, but he got the full information first with a trade and was rewarded for it. And now he doesn't even need energy to win. Well played from him. What's in his discard though? Quick. Ah! Okay, let's have one more game, then I'm going to go. We'll still not look at our deck or prize cards. It didn't really come up too much that game, but there are definitely decisions that could have been more informed. And I think that's what it's all about, right? Like, for example, I couldn't remember how many blowers he had got rid of. I think he got rid of 2, but I can't be certain. I think he sycamored them away. And this exercise is a bit futile because I'm actively trying to remember these things, whereas it's different to people who just don't care about them. I could see they already checked my discard pile. I had to for an attack. I can't not use my GX attack. It's too important. Okay, so in this spot, going second, I guess we'll just bridge it out an army of Zeruas, have this threatening if he's not going to deal with it. Everyone's raging. Uh-oh. So you know when we talked about alternate game plans? Plebseth is now following. Thank you, Plebseth. Oh, wow. So... you got a level 3 dragon today. Feels good, man. Great work. Now, we don't want to end, but we don't want to sycamore this hand either. So I think we might just attach pass here and have sycamore for next turn. It's probably our best line. Okay. Okay. So, turns out he was sat on a good hand rather than sat on nothing. And now we have a full hand of items. Beetlemon. Did he miss energy? Oh my lord. That is just hilarious. So, this is where we think about the sequencing of what we're going to do in this turn rather than starting to play cards immediately. So we'll be Evo Soldering out a Zoroark, so that's always being played. The DC will always be played onto Zorua, and we'll Ultra Ball away Max Potion Choice Band to try and develop Dartrix. No, sorry, to get a Lele ASAP. If we do the Evo Soda, do we trade before we do the Ultra Ball? Or do we think it's cleanest just to Sycamore away a clean hand? I think it's better just to Sycamore away a clean hand. But we could draw into more item cards that we can thin effectively. Don't check prizes because that's for nerds. So we're always playing this card. We're always playing this card. It's just whether or not we trade. Taking you back to Loughborough. Sadness. Don't look, don't look, don't look. Thank God it's not prized. Don't look, don't look, don't look. Drone to Floatstone feels good, man. We have a trade available to us. I don't think we'll be able to use Espeon because he's a Garbodor based deck. I want to... I don't want Ultra Ball just yet because that's probably going to be after the trade. The Evo Soda doesn't look strong because I don't want it this turn if I can get a Candy. Okay, this is definitely the trade card that we get rid of though. No rare Candy, so we do want to play this card for certain. This card always gets played. And because he is Noivern, we should play items out of our hand while we can. There's nothing I want to be Guzmering, so I think it will be the Stretcher and the Guzma that goes to the discard pile. I can't remember if we got rid of any Pokemon during this game. I don't think we have. Nothing's got knocked out. So we'll proactively grab ourselves a Zoroark here for next turn. For more draws, because when you are under item lock, it's better to draw lots of cards. And we'll just beat him up. So fortunate that he missed energy. Otherwise we were so boned. Twitch plays PTCGO. I really hope... that would be like so funny, but it's just not practical because every turn would take too long. Yeah, you want to see my list after this? That's fine. I wish I knew how many items I've played. Here we go. We played 7 already. 8 in the discard pile now. This is an oversight. Okay. Well, at least this isn't a the other Garb. And at least we still have items this turn. So we're always evolving these two. We have trades available to us before the N, and I feel like I want to get rid of this Zoroark. We may not even use the N based on our trades. So far we can't knock out the Garbodor. 6, 8, 10. I'll get rid of 1 Grass Energy. This could fuel our Ultra Ball. There's Zorua, which is excellent. Two, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 with the ping. And we know he packs E-Hammers, so I'll attach 2 Decidueye. And his hand size is 2, so we're not going to play the N. We are going to beat him up instead. Hearing differences in opinions from both players. Azul thinks Espeon's bad, others think it's super useful. I definitely like the card for certain. I think your Gardevoir matchup is difficult without Espeon. Very difficult without Espeon. Because essentially when you play Espeon, you don't ever attack with Zoroark, or you rarely ever attack with Zoroark, other than early tempo attacks to actually knock out like Ralts and stuff. You're typically just not attaching to anything on your board and just max potion spamming with Decidueye and doing pings all over the board. That's kind of what I go for, at least. Okay, start with this. I think we would rather have Rowlets on our board at this point. Guzma is an interesting one. Denying a Trubbish feels like a great idea. Also, getting rid of the possible possible item lock for another turn sounds epic as well. So we will use this. We will ping this, I think. This only has 200, right? There's only one threatening Decidueye. It just doesn't make sense to start pinging this down. So another trade. See, this is me being bad and not fully seeing my... I've made actions before fully seeing what we have available to us. See, now it's different. Now, in theory, I could draw into a candy next turn and my damage output's different. So that's proof of why sequencing should be done better. So that's an error for certain. Yeah, plebsef, that's fair enough. Neuven being sent to Scoop City. It would have been like GG City if he hit his energy on turn 2. But whatevsies. Skylar for parallel. Another Trash Launch Garbodor. Energy. This is free retreat, right? How many items have I played? Not enough, I don't think. Okay. Do we have any DC in our discard pile? We must do, because this is glowing. Ah, PTCGO cheating me out again. Okay, let's get some trades in. We'll try and hit ourselves rare candy if possible. Okay. I will play this Field Blower to get another Rowlet on our board. Okay. So, who needs to look at anyone's discard pile or prize check or anything? That's the moral of that story. Well, the real moral is that Neuven still ain't great. Scoop City. I mean, it would have absolutely wrecked us otherwise. Here's the list I was rocking with. I've not looked at this for a couple of days, actually. But yeah, this looks close to the mark on what I feel is good. I think double Floatstone is something I want to incorporate in. I'm still floating between 3 and 2 choice bands. This is probably more common that you'll see. But choice band math is so important for Zoropod, that 3 choice band is also really good. So I'd float between 3 and 2 choice bands. I'd really love to work in a 3rd choice band. Definitely a strong card in this deck. This is where I'm at right now. You could try dropping a Zorua for a choice band. It could be a little bit greedy though. I think you want Tor jumps in straight away. Another card that's been in and out of the deck is Special Charge, and also a Mewtwo has been in and out of the deck. At the moment it's out because Buzzwole is really hard regardless, and you just need to attack with other stuff like Lele instead. Only 3 Zoro now. I know, I cut down a Zoro just for fitting in the Special Charge, I think, that I wanted to do. I do still like 4 Zoro. You could just go down to 2 Evo Soda for 4th Zoroark. I'm not against that idea, but typically it's rare that you'll have more than 2 Zoroark out, I think, a lot of the time. You want to have your board filled with Rowlets. And damage. Damage is good. Hit them very hard. But I could definitely see another Zoroark coming in to the list. I have played 4-4 before in my no candy list. Lol. The max potions I really like over Ace Eroda as well. And third Guzma is like so clutch. I love playing 3 Guzma in this deck. Because so often you're trying to dig for Guzma. And so often I was hollow hunting back Guzma. I literally did it against Azul. It's something you always basically want to have access to most games. So the 3 Bridget's interesting. Potentially you could drop down to 2 and add in a Zoroark or add in that choice band I was asking for. It's a little bit greedy though, and I like hard Bridgeting so often when you're a Zoroark deck. And when you play, you know, 6-10 outs to Zoroark turn 2, you can go fairly greedy on your Bridgets. So yeah, it's kind of what we're working with. I'll, for now, keep the 1 Floatstone, but I think I'd advise start with 2 Floatstones and see if you can ever get away with it. But yeah, that's going to be it for the stream, guys. Pretty interesting chat on good habits and stuff. I don't think the sheet that I made, I don't think it's well set out enough to put in the Discord this time. Maybe over the next couple of days I will organize it in a better document that's actually going to be useful. But at the moment I just sort of used it as a guide to topics that we've spoken about for people who came into the stream a little bit later. But there you go, guys. That is going to be my topic on good habits. Now I need to start implementing them myself. And yeah, just being conscious of these sorts of things is pretty important, I think, a lot of the time. So hope you guys did enjoy, and I'll be back for Theorymon next week. I'm happy to take on ideas for next week's Theorymon as well. I've got a few ideas sort of in the backlog. It sort of depends on how much time I have during the week to actually prepare these videos. For example, last week I had a lot of thinking time to prepare. This week I didn't have so much thinking time to prepare, so this was more off the cuff and maybe a bit more random. And I did jump onto Facebook for some help from people. But yeah, I think it was a decent episode, and we'll be doing more Theorymon next Monday. And on Wednesday, what have we got? I don't know what Wednesday's going to be. We went over the new set cards. It may be time to start testing for Leipzig. I think it's time to get serious again. So yeah, should be good. More streams to come. We're also doing more random ones on like Thursdays and Fridays. If it's a snow day at work tomorrow, I'll be playing as well. I'll be on PTCGO, I can imagine. And it's way more likely that I'll have a day off tomorrow than today, because the temperatures dropped so much that there's a lot of black ice on the roads. And already on my way to work today, there were 2 fallen trees, and there's a lot of delays and stuff. So hope for a snow day tomorrow so we can have a snow day stream. But yeah, if not, just keep an eye on the Facebook and the Discord and all that stuff. That's where you'll see that I'm streaming, and always follow if you haven't already. But yeah, still no news on the stream, on the partnership with Twitch. They normally respond between 5 and 3 weeks, Mad Captain was telling me, so just hold out for that. It should be coming very soon. But yeah, lots of exciting stuff. Cheers for watching today, and we will be back on Wednesday at the very least, if not earlier. So thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next time.